Hello, and welcome to our Business Agility video podcast. So each week we spend 30 minutes exploring business and technology topics for growing businesses in Canada. So today we'll pull out our crystal ball and explore what will conferences look like in 2021. So our panelists today are Samantha DeForge, myself, Murray Quibell, and we are highlighted today by our guest panelist, Wes Scott. So Wes has more than 25 years of event and conference management experience and is the president and CEO of EventWorx Corporation. EventWorx is in the face-to-face business as a full-service event management and production company. So EventWorx is a name behind such events as the Oil Sands Conference and Trade Show. In Alberta here, PetroChem Canada Supply Chain Expo, which is one that we participate in. It's a supply chain management conference, and Smart Energy Kingston. So while EventWorx has been a strong voice advocating for live events in Alberta, they have, of course, had to pivot rapidly in 2020, towards virtual events and conferences. So Wes will share some insights into the challenges and opportunities in hosting virtual events and we can expect for 2021 and some of the real effects on people. So as always, our format is interactive. So send us your questions and comments in the chat box or comments, depending on which you're watching, if it's on the webinar format here or on the Facebook live stream. So we'll start with panelist introductions and then get right into our topic. So with that, I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Murray Quibell, the president of Accurate Solutions. So while we're a cloud software solutions provider, that may sound technical, but what we do know, and we talk about this all the time, is that people remain the most important component of a successful business system. And so I'm very excited to explore our topic today about some of the effects that we're seeing on how people are able to interact and engage today and in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wes for a further introduction.
Thank you very much, Murray, and I'm excited to be here, so thank you for that. Again, my name is Wes Scott. I'm the president of EventWorx. We're a relatively new event management company. My leadership team and I all came out of a much larger multinational event organizer where I spent the last 20 years with. Doing some very, very large events like the Global Petroleum Show when it was truly the largest oil and gas event in the world, and traveled all around the world. And I've fallen in love with face-to-face networking opportunities, large and small. Sometimes I get the best experiences from the smallest gatherings of 30 to 40 people because they're the right people. But at the same time, there's this adrenaline rush when you're bringing 70,000 people together from all around the world and what that takes to put together. So that's a little bit about us, I guess. And we've been doing this for a long time, never expecting that we'd be getting into virtual events. This year, we've actually produced 5 of them, a couple of our own, as well as some for clients. And they're much more rewarding than I anticipated. And I think we have to accept that these are going to be with us for a long time, and it's going to be fun to chat about this and how do we make them better for going into 2021. And I'm going to send it over to Samantha now to introduce herself.
Yeah, so my name is Samantha DeForge, and I work with Accurate Solutions as the business solutions specialist. And I think that a large part of my job and our job as a company is, and not just us, every company in the world is always to attend some sort of an event, whether it's a conference, and I'm sure that we all have done this at one point in our lives. And, now that we're coming into the final couple weeks of 2020, I think a lot of people in the market are under the impression that as soon as January 1 hits, everything's going to revert back to normal. But I think that we can all really look at the whole big picture at this point and think, okay, you know what, this isn't going to happen. Obviously, Alberta's now in a second wave or a second lockdown, so to speak. So, with that being said, Wes, you guys specialize in events. You probably have some planning that you've done for 2021. What businesses can expect as far as, events go? Was it going to be the first 6 months, 9 months? What are your thoughts on events now moving into 2020 as we wrap up this year?
Great question, Samantha. And this is where the crystal ball is really fuzzy. But I think if we look at what we do know, and that is that it's going to take most of the year, if not all of the year, in getting Canadians vaccinated. So if we have that in mind, we know that it's going to be very difficult to run events in the first quarter of the year, maybe even the second half. And I think the third quarter, fourth quarter starts to look more positive. The concern that we will have is public confidence coming back to large scale events. You know, how many people will be comfortable moving back into the Saddle Dome to watch hockey? What will those restrictions be? You know, will it still be a 6-foot distance between people? Will you still be wearing masks by this time next year? You know, will you still want to go to the movie theaters? Will you want to go to a concert? So I think there's so many unknowns, but I think most of us are probably anxious to do something, but it's going to be what scale are we comfortable with?
And I think that's a huge thing because with us, you know, we have the Acumatica Summit, for instance, that we have every year where we get to go see new product features and things like that. Typically, that conference is scheduled for the end of January every year. They've pushed it out till May, you know, with this optimistic mindset. But I think for people that aren't within the United States, it's a completely different ballpark. But I mean, do you think that there's just going to start being a hybrid, you know, series of events where now that we've all went through this together, not only as a country or a continent, but as a world, do you feel like this is going to enable people and organizations to create events that they normally create that are in person, but also have more of an international reach as far as, you know, targeting people in other parts of the world with, you know, tools and technology like FeedLoop or what we've seen in conferences virtually this far?
You know, I think that is absolutely the glass half full approach that we have to look at is, you know, with a crisis comes opportunity. And, you know, for businesses like our own, you know, this crisis has forced us to pivot. And with that, as we move forward, you know, how do we take this and turn it into an opportunity? And as you said, you know, can you do a hybrid? Can you do live and virtual and combine them? And can you monetize that? And in monetizing that, can you double, triple, quadruple your attendance because those people are not spending the same sort of dollars to travel, you know, on airplanes, stay in hotels, you know, meals and so forth that they would typically spend to go to an event. If there's pieces that they can take in virtually, you know, one of the things that I think has worked really well is professional development and education. Over this last 12 months, there has been no shortage of offerings to be able to watch a webinar on any topic under the sun and for very low cost. Mm-hmm. And I think that will continue. I think the bigger challenge will be on the exhibitor side. You know, if you're a vendor at trade shows, how do you ensure you're getting ROI on those virtual events? How do you know you're seeing the right people? And I think that's going to be the challenge in front of organizations like ourselves and our partners, like a FeedLoop or an Event Mobi, is how do we enhance the exhibitor experience to make that rewarding for them, and also make it interesting for the attendees that aren't traveling there to, you know, walk the show, as we say.
I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah, let's drill into that a bit, if you don't mind, Wes. I mean, I can relate to some of the virtual events and virtual conference that I've attended to, and I think when it first came out, some of it was a little clunky, and I think people didn't really know that you could actually engage with people in their, and I'll use air quotes, in their booth. But maybe help us understand what you're seeing in terms of even now some of how people are able to kind of engage in what you've, maybe some of the experience you've had and what we're seeing kind of going forward in those virtual events.
Yeah, certainly we've been watching different virtual event apps develop, and it's amazing the monumental shifts that these organizations have made over the last 9 and 10 months. You know, there was certainly virtual events happening prior. There was a very good company called vFairs that is doing more of a 3D rendering exhibition experience. But where it was, you know, still falling a little bit flat is the interaction. You know, how do you do the virtual handshake and network? FeedLoop, I know they're rolling out some more tools for theirs. The one that we're currently using allows for one-to-one video chatting. So as you come into the exhibit space, you can click on the live link and start a one-to-one conversation with that exhibitor. The exhibitor can also in turn schedule in-booth presentations and invite people into those where it's a small group of people, like you would have done in a face-to-face setting for 6 or 8 people that are interested in that topic. So we're seeing some stuff like that happen. We're watching gamification. We did an event in November that used gamification as a way to get the attendees to drop by the exhibitors' space and connect with them. And that was actually quite a lot of fun. I was amazed at how many people participated and how anxious they were to play the game. So we're going to see a lot more of that, and I think we're going to have to get more creative on how we roll out gamification at virtual events.
Maybe tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, gamification, maybe drill into that a little bit. Like what kind of games and what kind of interactions are you seeing there? And I do think that will evolve, but what have you seen so far?
Yeah, so getting the two-way interaction is really the hard piece. Like this is a webinar. So the three of us are seeing one another, but we're not really seeing the other attendees. We're hoping that they're paying attention, they're watching us. So the gamification is really to try and create some of that interaction. And we kept this one really simple because we weren't sure, how people would respond to it for that particular audience. And it was relatively new for that group, so we didn't want to overdo it. So we made it quite easy that all they had to do was drop by an exhibitor's booth, and they could download a code that they would then enter into the game app, or they had to go around the different sessions and look for a secret code hidden. So it was a little bit of a scavenger hunt. Some of the most fun that we had was actually during the lunch hours, where we were doing live polling, but it was just on sort of outrageous topics. And it was just to try and get the chatter going. And it was really a fun thing to see people just having a little bit of fun over the lunch hour with live polling, the chatter that was going back and forth. So I think, that's the sort of thing we want to watch for more.
I'd say it's funny that we say that. I know that when we had back in March, when we had our COVID initial hit, we sort of did these Friday sort of, drinks with the team, or we'd invite some of our customers, whoever kind of wanted to join. And once we got the RSVP, what we did is we hosted sort of this very, I don't know how to put this, but Family Feud, but it was, in Excel. And, but it was a lot of fun, right? So we had to find ways for people to buzz in, because obviously you don't want people screaming the answers, but we did do that. And I think that it is a really good way to build teams, even in a virtual environment. So I think that's really cool how that happens. But as far as another aspect goes, I think I really want to emphasize one thing, being obviously in an industry that's being changed and revolutionized daily by technology. In the past, I've worked with companies where, they were reluctant to send staff that, wanted to learn about new technologies, new advancements or enhancements to a particular product, right, given the industry we're in. Do you feel like businesses typically, prior to COVID, maybe were a little bit more reluctant to send people who would probably have had a lot of value in attending these conferences, and now these sort of hybrid, this hybrid solution is going to be sort of a way for the future for these types of companies to be able to send, their staff, their developing staff, on learning new things in a much more affordable way?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And certainly I know in our previous company, we were guilty of that, is that there just wasn't enough money to send everybody you wanted to send to take in an event, just because of the sheer costs of, flying out of Calgary to anywhere is expensive. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but, flying out of Calgary is just ridiculous. And I think this does allow that opportunity to start to introduce people to new topics, new learnings, without having to invest a lot of money in doing it. So again, I think they're education and personal development is going to be, quite enhanced by this. And as we talked about, you now have the ability to log into something that's happening anywhere in the world. And there are so many other people to learn from other than, sort of our immediate group, if you'd like. So the opportunity to take in a conference that's happening halfway around the world is really great. Having it recorded so that you can go back on it and, relearn it again is super useful. Again, the one we did it here in November, I could not believe how anxious people were to get their hands on the content afterwards. It was fairly technical, so they were really keen to go back in and listen to it and really try to comprehend it. And it was like, guys, give us a couple of days to edit these. It's like, no, we need them right now. So I think it's a great thing to have happen, and it will continue now.
Hey, Wes, one of the things I want you to comment on the costs, and I think it's easy for us to kind of imagine that, if you're comparing the cost of a virtual event versus an in-person one, you think about the cost of setting up exhibits and travel costs, venue costs, and things like that. I think it's easy for us to say, holy man, a virtual event is, I'll hesitate to say that it's free but some people might think of that. But what we do know, I heard someone that facilitates virtual or an event that's become virtual speak yesterday about how it probably takes her about twice as long to prepare for it. So it's almost at the standard of quality and execution because it's being recorded and possibly leveraged across the world. Obviously the standard is higher, but maybe just comment on the relative costs of pulling off a virtual event.
Thank you, Murray. That's a good question. We've done enough of these now that in many cases it takes us 12 months to prepare for an event. If it's a well-rounded event that's got multiple conference streams, workshops, a trade show, networking events, all of those things bolted on, it takes about a year of planning. And, you have to start doing your research quite early on to understand what the hot topics are, recruiting speakers and all of that. None of that work goes away in the virtual set.
Yeah.
The only thing that really changes becomes the physical, location and the catering. Audio visual very much stays the same way. And, as the person, you chatted or saw yesterday, alluded, you're trying to actually up your game. And I think that's going to be something that we all try to do moving forward, because I think 2021 is going to roll over and people are going to be less forgiving about all the technical glitches that we were allowed to have in 2020 with virtual events. It'll be, now you got to up your game and your production value's got to be higher. So from a cost point of view, what we're seeing is we still need our salespeople, we'll still need our marketing people, our conference producers. So all of that stays the same. The only thing that ends up changing is the venue gets substituted for the virtual event app.
Yeah.
And the virtual event apps, we've seen them range anywhere. The cheapest that we've seen is about $7,000 to $8,000. And we have received quotes up into the hundreds of thousands.
Huh.
And the challenge that we have still is getting folks to understand the revenue side that we need to pay those costs, our staff costs and those hard costs of even if it's a $30,000 or $40,000, hard cost to deliver, they don't seem to see the same value in participating in a virtual event as a sponsor, as an exhibitor, or as an attendee. So we're hoping that, moving forward, they will start to see the value of it as much as they would in a live setting.
And I think it comes back to creativity. I know we spoke about this and how businesses really need to become more creative. And of course, there's limitations as far as, a conferencing tool, if there are any. But do you think that there's a way businesses can really position themselves in a unique way prior to either exhibiting at an event? Sometimes member lists and things are released, but obviously a lot of people are working from home now. So it's not like you can really easily send them something, because probably people are reluctant to give away their home addresses. But how would you think that a business can get creative in this time prior to a virtual event to try to gain as much momentum as they possibly can?
I think it's not that much different than what we would, want to look at for physical events. Most exhibitors or most, sponsors maybe don't want to invest in mailing things out to potential customers unless it's, almost like a high level VIP group because it's just so cost prohibitive these days, but it does happen. But I think digitally it can happen a lot. One of the things that we still try to encourage all of our sponsors and all of our speakers to do is make sure that they're marketing themselves. Use LinkedIn, use Twitter, use Instagram, whatever they're comfortable using, all three if we can, to promote the fact that they're going to be participating in that event. And what we try to do is we try to provide substantial discounts for the attendees that come through those speakers and those exhibitors as an incentive for those exhibitors to push it out on LinkedIn a number of times or Twitter, whatever it is. I think the cool thing with virtual events is people can be really creative with video and have a little bit of fun with it. And, I don't know if you guys watch much on LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook very much, but I do like what's on LinkedIn. And I love the creativity that people are putting into their commercials. And I think you can use that to drive a lot of attendance to your presence at a virtual event. Does that answer the question?
No, it does. I think that, I think it's a really good time for people to just really start fresh and just capitalize off of people's creativity. For the last however many years, people have just been, okay, there's a conference, we're going to get on a plane, we're going to check into our hotel, we're going to eat some rubber chicken, and then we're going to go attend the first session, right? It's always been so standard. Now I think this has really sort of opened up a light almost, or opened up, a box of opportunities for so many businesses to get so creative with what they're doing, right? Capitalize off people, right? Let their brains sort of do fun things. Try to get momentum in different ways.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's the time to risk some new things and try it. And a lot of this stuff isn't that expensive to trial. You and I were chatting before we went live about your company's, your customers' opening e-commerce stores. I would think that this is a massive opportunity for organizations to finally, make that shift. If they haven't done it, they're being forced to it. But it's fantastic that it's happening. And we have to look back on 2020 and go, okay, what are some of the positives we did to be more creative with our businesses? And it was sometimes out of desperation.
Yeah.
Kicking and screaming will be better for it.
I think we've seen some of the things I'm thinking is that we've seen a lot of communities develop, and these are online communities, collaborations that we wouldn't have seen before, and whether it's around selling online, e-commerce, and what's coming from the Chamber of Commerce or the tech community or business owners all over the place, that it does seem like there are a lot more resources available to help people figure out what they need to do. I do want to talk a little bit about when we only have 5 minutes here. So, hey, I do encourage people, send in your questions if we want to try to hit them in the next a couple of minutes here. But I want to talk about the people aspect. And again, that's important because I think as much as we talked about the professional development opportunities and education on the online and on-demand resources, I think it's just not the same. That business still happens with people get together over a dinner or over a drink, and yet how much of that can we get online? And maybe just want to talk about the people aspect and maybe what you're seeing out there so far.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I pay attention a lot to that because I do think that there's a lot of value in face-to-face events.
Yeah.
And from a mental state, a mental welfare point of view, we need others. That is what human beings are to a nut. We need one another. And I worry about that longer term, what it's going to be like that we get more and more entrenched in our basement offices or,
yeah.
Sitting at the dining room table. at some point we have to get back out and start seeing people and doing business again and visiting one another in our offices and being comfortable with that. This week I got plugged into a group that is working on rapid testing to try and encourage the government to do much more around rapid testing, so that maybe in 2021, if we don't all have the vaccine, that businesses can sign up to pay to have rapid testing done, within their establishments or their events. It's something that we're looking at. We completely see the validity of hosting the oil sands conference and trade show where we get 3,000 to 4,000 people and having rapid testing for everybody coming in. Because at some point we have to get back to, what normal used to be. So we want to look for tools that allow that. And again, just going back to that mental health piece, I think that's, there's a lot of lonely people out there that probably need to get back in front of their friends, their families, their coworkers, and we shouldn't ignore that. And virtual, unfortunately, isn't necessarily going to replace it. We can do the best we can through this, but I'm not sure it's quite the same. We were chatting this morning on our conference call with our staff about what to do for the Christmas party, and we're talking about, okay, well, let's send cocktails out to everybody. Well, I'm not sure alcohol's the answer either.
It is in my household.
It's been a popular answer for a lot of people, for sure, and I think a lot of people are having some fun with it. But we do have to obviously be cognizant that it is tough. It's tough for a lot of people and a lot of businesses. So yeah, that we always have to be respectful of that. So we have a couple of minutes, maybe just some closing thoughts. I'll start with you, Sam, and then maybe some closing thoughts from Wes then after. But what's a couple of closing thoughts?
I think as far as events go, I think that, eventually I think it's going to enable a lot of companies, to really be a little bit more creative as far as who and what kind of resources they're sending to these conferences, with the options of being both virtual and in-house, as far as, we development goes and things like that. Another aspect that we kind of touched on, but we didn't, is, this people aspect. People want to meet people, but, we were talking about it. It's so hard for someone to just sit there and scope somebody out at a trade show and then just have their legs actually move to walk towards them, right? So I do think that it does offer a little bit of a better solution for people in tough situations. And I do think that conferences will resume. And I think a lot of people are pretty grateful they're not going to eat a lot of rubber chicken.
Wes, a quick closing thought. I like that, everything you said, Sam. I would agree. Wes, quick closing thought there.
I think we have to get our heads around virtual events being here for the next couple of years. So let's make the best of them that we can. Businesses need to think of these as marketing and business development opportunities. They do exist. They have to be more creative, as Samantha said. They're going to have to go and tap the attendees on the shoulder, in those networking functions on the virtual apps. So get involved. I think it's a great way to build a community, and probably much larger than we have before, because people do not have to travel. They can attend from anywhere. I think the networking is key, and the networking follow-up. Somebody was fantastic and shared this with me this morning. When you network at a conference, instantly reach out on LinkedIn and connect with them, so you have that connection after the conference closes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are sort of some key points that I'd like to leave us with.
Yes, and thanks, Wes. Yeah, I think it is something that, we found that some industries and people, I think there's a compelling efficiency and a reach that we get with these events that we didn't get to see before. But obviously there's a balance, right? And that's what I would leave with, is that, this has changed business in many cases, forever. But we still need to engage as people in different places, and hopefully we're able to do that in the upcoming year. But thank you very much, Wes. And then we'll probably close off now. Sam, what do we have up next week?
Next week, we have Bob Bernard joining us on storytelling. So the session's called Calling All Innovators, Pioneers, and Rebels to Tell Your Story. And he's really going to focus on how you can genuinely be your unique, build a unique selling proposition. So it's our last podcast of the year. We will be renewing the registration for January here in the next few weeks. So be sure to join us. And I'm hoping that we can actually bring Wes back maybe in like March and see how things are going. So thank you all for joining us today. Everyone stay safe, and hope to see you next week.
Thanks very much. Look forward to meeting you face to face at some point.
Yeah. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.